All right, 6 p.m. Rance, you can go ahead and start the stream to Facebook. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and we'll wait like 1 more minute uh, to start the presentation. But in the meantime, people are welcome to put their names in the chat, where you're from, your organization, anything you're comfortable sharing with us while we wait. Start. Half a minute, start. Again, if you're just joining, feel free to put your name and where you're from or what group you might be with in the chat if you're comfortable sharing. And we can go ahead and start. Just a little quick agenda before we get into the introduction presentation. We'll start with the intros, and then I'll talk a little bit about Black Lung and Silica after we watch a short video that we recently released. So after the video and the Black Lung overview, we'll talk a little bit about Silica itself and how that is driving the current Black Lung epidemic that we see in Central Appalachia. I think someone just asked if there was sounds. You all can hear me. Can everyone else hear me okay? Okay, thank you, Rebecca. I'm sorry, Yolanda, I'm not sure why your sound might not be working. Of course, you probably couldn't hear that though. And then after I talk about the Silica, Rebecca will go into detail about MSHA's draft Silica Rule, which just came out at the end of June. And we'll talk briefly about the last week's comment hearing in Beckley, West Virginia, hosted by MSHA itself. And then we'll end with how you can help us and other Black lung advocates fight for a stronger Silica Rule. So first, again, I'm Quentin King. I'm with Appalachian Voices. We're an environmental community development nonprofit in Appalachia. We have offices in Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, and we do some work in Southern West Virginia. And I live here in Charleston, West Virginia. And we incorporated Black lung into our work just a few years ago after our office in Southwest Virginia in the Norton area had been hearing about the epidemic and the challenges that people with Black lung were facing trying to access their benefits. And I'll let Rebecca introduce herself and ACLC.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Quentin. My name is Rebecca Shelton. I'm the Director of Policy at Appalachian Citizens Law Center. We are a public interest law firm and policy organization based in Whitesburg, Kentucky. And a big part of our work since our founding over 20 years ago has been in representing minors in their federal Black lung disability cases, as well as in mine safety and whistleblower cases. So this issue of dust exposure has been something we've been working on for essentially as long as we've been around as an organization, and glad to talk to you all about it today.
Thank you, Rebecca. So before I begin the presentation, or my portion of the presentation, I thought it was important for you all to hear about, or from voices who are impacted by Black lung or who are helping people directly trying to access benefits or getting their medical diagnoses for Black lung. Unfortunately, we couldn't have any former minors join us today, but we do have a video that our groups produced and released recently. So it's just a couple minutes and we will listen or we'll watch that.
Recently, just over 500 cases of complicated Black lung now has been imaged here in this clinic. So a significant amount of increase just over the last few years for the progression and the severity of the disease.
Now you see younger men, even younger than I am, in Black lung. It's hard for a person that is used to working and all of a sudden you can't work no more.
Those minors are at end stage Black lung, potentially fatal Black lung disease with extremely short exposures at extremely young ages.
We are definitely finding that those individuals that are highly susceptible to the development of disease are individuals that are usually placed into situations where they're exposed not only to coal dust, but also silica dust, potentially in large amounts.
But now it's become a lot of rock and they in the silica dust, and the silica dust is a lot worse than just the regular coal mine dust.
Making sure that the individual is not getting exposed to that very dangerous element is extremely important in preventing this disease, and that should be our main focus.
A strong silica standard would mean that coal miners can expect a long, healthful, dignified working career. We need to err on the side of protecting our coal miners, and we need to demand on the record in the rulemaking process that MSHA do just that.
Every time the coal miner tries to get something done, it seems like we don't get the chance that the coal companies get. It seems like we have to struggle more to get anything through or pass. More people got to die before they really start to do something.
The coal industry and frankly, the government, all of us have failed coal miners decade after decade for far too long. We need, at long last, a strong Silica rule with no loopholes, no fudge factors, no wiggle room. This has to be a preventive rule that errs on the side of protecting coal miners. That is long overdue.
All right, thank you for watching that. So before, I think it's important to, of course, give an overview of what Black lung is in case anyone joining us isn't familiar. It's a term for coal workers' pneumoconiosis, CWP, and it happens after repeated exposure and inhalation of coal dust and silica dust in the mines. These fine particles get into your lungs and they don't leave, and they scar and harden your lung tissue. It's an industrial occupational disease, so we won't get it in our homes if you're exposed to it in the work setting, and it's preventable if mines were clear of dust and were following the rules that they're supposed to follow. The likelihood that you would get it would, of course, be much lower. Unfortunately, it's incurable and progressive, so it gets worse over time. And of course, there's ways in which miners can be diagnosed with a lesser form of the disease and get pulled out of the mines, and that will stop it from getting much worse. But over time, there's still a chance that it could get worse. This picture here shows 3 lungs. One has no black lung, and the next 2 have different forms. Simple as what I just mentioned. It's a lesser form, but still an impactful, painful form of the disease. And then the complicated on the far right is the most progressive form of the disease. And that's a lung that is severely scarred by dust. And it's on the rise in Central Appalachia in particular, specifically. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was quite high. In the 70s and late 60s, where you saw a lot of movement and activism trying to raise awareness about the disease. That's when you saw protections being put in place, and then of course the black lung benefits that were created to support miners who came down with the disease. And it started to decrease in the 90s, but since 2000 it's been on the rise, especially in Central Appalachia. And we'll go into the reasons shortly. Yeah, this graph is super important to see how much worse it is here compared to the rest of the country. So yeah, it's at its recent, or it's at the highest in the last few decades. I mentioned 2000 is when it started getting worse. 1 in 5 Central Appalachian miners, according to the latest data, have some form of the disease, miners with more than 25 years of experience. And 1 in 20 have the most severe or complicated form of the disease that is totally debilitating. And you saw or heard in the video that people are getting it earlier and earlier in their careers. Miners in 30s and 40s are being diagnosed, are showing signs of black lung that typically you would see in miners who spent decades in the mines or who are in their 50s and 60s or older. So it's hurting people more and worse and younger now. And so why is this happening? In Appalachia in particular, it's driven primarily, driven especially by silica dust exposure. Silica is 20 times more toxic than coal dust, and silica is found in quartz and rocks. So this graph here, or this chart, image here, shows you a high-level view of a mining operation or how it can work. So when you're drilling down, trying to get to the coal seams, the black parts there, of course you're cutting slopes diagonally through rocks. So there's one element which can be exposed. And also a lot of the thicker, bigger coal seams in Appalachia have been mined out over the last century or more. So now miners are having to dig into thinner coal seams, even deeper underground in some parts. But when you're digging into those thin coal seams, you have a higher likelihood of hitting rock when you're digging. So a lot of that silica exposure, when you're pulverizing, pounding that rock dust, it's getting into the miner's lungs. And next, I'll talk a little bit about the lack of silica protections for miners in particular. So federal agencies first proposed a standard of 50 micrograms per cubic meter of air. That's a standard micrograms per cubic meter in the 1970s. Specifically 1974, so it's been almost 50 years exactly since the federal government has been or has known that 50 micrograms would be important protecting miners for workers from coal dust and silica dust. Most industries have a silica exposure limit of 50 micrograms, and that was set by OSHA just a few years ago. But miners are subject to MSHA, which is the Mine Safety and Health Administration. And currently MSHA has a PEL of 100. So that's double what all other workers are allowed to be exposed to before actions must be taking place to get the levels under. So we've known for decades that miners are an increased risk of black lung due to silica dust. And organizations like Rebecca's have been advocating for a long time, and ours as well, for MSHA to finally create a rule that would allow or that would require mining companies to lower their silica exposure for miners and have some enforcement mechanisms in place. So after quite a while and long delays, long waits, MSHA finally released a draft rule at the end of June that would require or that would set a level of 50 micrograms per cubic meter of air, which Rebecca will talk about. And she's also going to highlight some weaknesses. But one weakness that I just wanted to show quick images of, the rule over relies on the use of respirators, masks, to have some sort of compliance while miners are underground, trying to protect them from silica exposure. We've heard from miners a lot about how difficult it is to wear a respirator when you're deep underground, where it's hot, it's dark, it's cramped. And you're trying to operate this heavy machinery that is very dangerous, and you're trying to keep yourself safe, trying to keep your friends and coworkers safe. And when you're wearing goggles to protect your eyes, the heavy respirator can fog up your glasses, and it just makes it difficult. So of course no one's against respirators, but the rule over relies on using respirators when there are other, stronger engineering controls in place, or that should be in place. So respirators should be the last line of defense. So I just wanted to show a few pictures about what the conditions are like in the mine. So you see that these miners are, in low, shallow, narrow holes in the ground, and it's hard to even stand up, let alone operate heavy equipment while you're trying to, wear a heavy mask. In this image, final image I'm just going to show for now, is a miner spraying down coal dust with water. That's one engineering control that operators are supposed to do in order to keep dust levels down. When you spray the dust with water, it keeps the dust particles from getting in the air and hopefully out of miners' lungs. So that's it for my overview of black lung disease and silica exposure. And now to get a little more granular in the weeds of the rule, Rebecca is going to talk about the rule and some deficiencies. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Quentin. Yeah, so I'm just going to give a high-level overview of some of the big pieces of the rule and some of the things that we'd like to see improved and that we're focusing our comments on. So you can go to the next slide, please. So as Quentin said, the good thing, the obviously good thing about this rule is it reduces the permissible exposure limit to 50 micrograms per minute cubes of air over a miner shift, an 8-hour shift. So it does put in place that protective limit. Currently, miners are functionally permitted to be exposed to around 100 micrograms. So this effectively cuts that permissible exposure limit in half. This is long overdue. The Mine Act requires MSHA to set standards which most adequately assure, on the basis of the best available evidence, that no miner will suffer material impairment of health or functional capacity. And clearly, the current level of exposure is not doing that. So the rule itself sets 50 micrograms as the highest maximum exposure limit. It also sets an action level in the rule of 25 micrograms, such that at that level of 25 micrograms, if a sample of dust in the mine comes back there, it triggers some periodic and regular sampling from the operators themselves to monitor the dust levels. The 50 micrograms, if an operator goes above that, they are required to take some corrective actions to install better ventilation and engineering controls to reduce dust levels. Even though this 50 micrograms limit is a huge improvement, less is always better. It's also clear in the rule that even at a 50 micrograms limit, some miners will continue to get sick. So it will save miners' lives, it will prevent illness, but there's still high probability that miners are going to continue to get sick at that level. And so the lower that operators can consistently keep dust in the mines, the better. Go to the next slide, please. So in the rule, what it says, the proposed rule, is that MSHA, so currently the way that MSHA samples the way that samples for silica are taken is that MSHA inspectors sample quarterly. So they go into the mines, take their samples and analyze them back in a lab. And under this rule, that quarterly sampling by MSHA inspectors will continue. The rule also says that all coal mine operators have to conduct an initial baseline sampling within a few months of the rule being finalized. But it says that if there's that baseline sample, as well as some other sample to validate the results, comes back under that 25 micrograms, that corrective action limit, the operator will not be required to regularly conduct sampling unless mine conditions change or mine operations can change. If sampling is over, if a sample from that baseline sample is returned to be over 25 micrograms, or if any kind of sampling that is above, or any kind of MSHA inspector sampling comes back above that action level, that 25 micrograms, a mine operator will be required to conduct periodic quarterly sampling in addition to MSHA inspectors. So the operators themselves would be responsible for sampling every quarter. The other kind of sampling that they propose in the rule is corrective action sampling, which is if a sample comes back over the permissible exposure limit of 50 micrograms, the operator is required to correct the mine environment, and then samples after those corrections will be taken. Those are the corrective action samples to assure that those controls are actually controlling the dust. There are a lot of issues from our perspective with the proposal in terms of sampling. There's a lack of clarity on the number of shifts that will be sampled. It's not clear if sampling will conduct over one shift, should be conducted over one shift or multiple. We think it should be conducted over multiple shifts. There is also, from our perspective, no reason to not require all operators to just conduct regular sampling. It's not, mine environments, especially in underground mines, change so often that to be cautious and protective, it just makes a lot of sense to require sampling across all mines. One of the ways to kind of offer some flexibility in which positions are sampled and what areas of mines are sampled, because there is variation in mine environments and operations, would be to require operators to specify with MSHA approval what kind of sampling and of what positions and what areas of the mine that they would be sampling in the ventilation plans that they already create for the mines. The other thing that we want to see, the other big challenge with the sampling proposal, is that they are going to be relying on technology. It's called gravimetric samplers. And these gravimetric samplers can really easily be manipulated in the mine environment. You can hang them in a different place in the mine so that they're not taking in the dust. You can put a rag over the intake. There's a lot of different ways over many decades that mine operators, when conducting sampling, have been able to manipulate the results from the sampling they conduct. And so we are concerned about this technology. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of other alternatives, but there are some in development. And so we want to see in the rule that some specification that the best available sampling system and technology will be used going forward, so that we don't somehow stick ourselves with relying on this technology, even when better technology is available. And rules are supposed to be technology forcing. So there is an ability for a rule to publish and help bring the technology along with it. So next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of corrective actions, there are a series of steps, a few different corrective actions that are outlined in the rule, the proposed rule. The first one, as I mentioned earlier, if a sample comes back over 50 micrograms, they will be required to modify their ventilation, their engineering controls, their administrative controls to reduce dust exposure for miners. There is also, MSHA says that they will be able to issue citations if samples are over 50 micrograms over that Pell, or if there's any kind of lack of compliance or evasion of putting in new controls for dust. But it's really vague in the rule. And so we would like to see some more specificity that those are the kinds of actions that MSHA will take to ensure that when an operator is over the 50 micrograms limit, swift action is taken to correct it, and also that there is an incentive to correct it because the operator will be cited and penalized. So that's sort of what we're proposing, that we need to ensure that penalties are meaningful to ensure compliance with the rule, that citations will be issued even if just a single sample is over the Pell, rather than giving the operator the benefit of the doubt. We really need to protect miners. And so if a single sample is over the Pell, that's when the corrective actions need to take place. And we say that because in the current coal dust rule, you can have multiple samples. They kind of take an average of samples to see if before they do citations and issue penalties. So we want this to be really strict on the Pell. Next slide, please. And this one is on hierarchy controls. This last piece, MSHA in the proposed rule is requiring that compliance be achieved through engineering controls, which are some of the controls that Quentin showed already, and where you are really controlling the dust levels in the entire mine environment. It does not permit respirators to be used as a primary form of compliance with the rule. However, if a dust level is found to be over 50 micrograms in sampling, the rule does say that respirators will be permitted to be used as a temporary form of interim compliance while proper engineering and administrative controls are put in place. We are really concerned about the rule temporary because it's not well defined. It could be very generously interpreted by the operators in terms of just whenever they can get them fixed. And so we do not want this provision in the rule. We would prefer that operators pull their miners out of the mine environment when the levels are over 50 micrograms and cease production until the proper controls can be put into place. So I think that covers the really high level pieces of the rule that we are concerned about and want to see improvements made upon. We are very excited that this rule is finally moving forward. And so if you have any questions about the proposal, feel free to reach out to any of us at our organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So there's the last couple slides. When MSHA proposed the rule at the end of June, they announced there would be 2 hearings, one in Arlington, Virginia, which there is not much mining happening, and another in Denver, Colorado. They didn't announce any in Central Appalachia, which is where, it's where the epidemic is hitting the hardest and the worst, people younger, what we said earlier. And also it's hard for miners in that area, in our area, to get to DC. And many have oxygen tanks, many are retired, don't have the funds to stay overnight. So after a lot of advocacy, the MSHA decided to have a hearing in Beckley, and that happened in Beckley, West Virginia. That happened just last Thursday morning, August 10th. And there were several current and former miners, several people who work helping miners with claims, medical professionals, attorneys, advocates. one, and there's plenty of great coverage that we're going to share with you on the last slide. But one miner in particular, his name is Terry Lilly, and he has black lung disease. You can see the top of his quote here that he's at 40% lung capacity. But what he said was really important. You know, we mentioned how the samplers can be easily gamed. So Terry's, you know, the final paragraph of this quote, cheating samples is what we need to stop. If we stop that, we could save lives. He went on, it's too late for me, but I'd like these young people to be protected. One of these days, they'll be like me and they can't walk across the parking lot. So, you know, of course, we are fighting to have a stronger Silica Rule to protect the current miners. Of course, there's plenty we can do to help miners who already have the disease, such as black lung benefits improvements. But yeah, it's very important for people, for MSHA to hear directly from miners who are impacted by black lung disease in the heart of Appalachia last week. Our final slide is, I'm sharing a link with you all. It will have what you see here. So we have a grassroots petition that we're asking people to sign and share. It will create a comment that will or compile and send to MSHA about the rule. It's very simple to do. On the right side is a screenshot, and we're asking that you read the comment, that you sign your first and last name, your email, and your zip code, and then we'll send that to MSHA on your behalf. There's also a way that you can write your own comment if you're so inclined, but everything can be found here in this document that I'm linking. That has a way for you to, a sample tweet that you could share on your social media or send to friends, encouraging them to sign the petition or to write the rule, or to share the plenty of articles that have highlighted this rule and the plight of miners with black lung disease in Appalachia lately. I think that does it for our normal presentation. I know we're at time. Is there any question burning in the attendees that you'd like to ask? You can raise your hand or type it into the chat. Or of course you can email us. Rebecca put her email in already. I'll put mine right here. You can find both our emails on our respective websites. Thank you, Rebecca. I see there is one. Yolanda asked, how's sampling determined? Is silica inherent in the mines? I think, Rebecca, you touched on that in your presentation, right?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of different kinds of sampling. One in the proposed rule is that MSHA will continue to take samples every quarter. And the other is that depending on an operator's baseline sample, if it's over 25 micrograms, then they will have to sample every quarter. So, you know, silica is not inherent in all mines, but it is in a lot of different kinds of rocks. So sandstone, limestone, granite, that's just to name a few. So it's not in all mines, but it's in a lot of mines. It's a big problem in underground and surface coal mines, and certainly also in the metal and non-metal mines that MSHA regulates.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for your question, Yolanda. I think that might be it. So really thank you all for joining us this afternoon, depending on if you're on the East Coast, well, either way, afternoon, East Coast or West Coast. And please, again, share the petition, sign our petition, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And with that, I think we can end the webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Y'all have a good evening.